Welcome everyone. And hello, Hannah. Egypt in the chat. That I think it probably wins the furthest to attend the webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. That's awesome.
And we're going to be talking about ancient Egypt. So glad to have you, Faten.
Yes.
Sorry if I mispronounced your name, but that's so exciting that you're here.
Yeah. A bit of a coincidence there.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. I say let's kick things off. Let me share my screen and officially welcome to everyone here who is coming in for this live podcast. We are going to be talking all about art today. It is full steam ahead, and while our subtitle here says bringing art into STEM, we are also going to be talking about social studies, language arts, and really just full interdisciplinary learning, because art should go in everything. I mean, I'm biased, but
Well, if anyone doesn't know, Hannah has a bit of an art background, much more than myself. And you'll see some of her creativity coming through today.
I do have a large art background. In fact, many of my hobbies involve doing art, as well as a degree in animation with a minor in studio arts. So art is always something that gets me excited now as an adult, and always got me excited as a student as well. How about you, Evan? Did you enjoy art themed
I
homework
did, yes.
assignments?
I did not actually enjoy art as much as a child, but I am finding a second, not really career, but hobby in art as an adult now. So I think it is so valuable to stimulate that part of the brain and really encourage that creativity early on. Even for kids like myself who may be a little bit more resistant to it and more on the quantitative side of things, it's still definitely worthwhile to integrate those subjects together as much as we can.
Well, and I also feel like art is so applicable. Like, people think of art as not necessarily relevant or useful in the greater world, but if you think about any job, whether you are an engineer or a small business person or anything in, graphic design, landscape design, all these areas, like, you have to be able to draw and communicate your thoughts, whether you're trying to design a brochure or a logo or a new thing that you're crafting. Just visual
It's everywhere.
communication, which is only one type of art, is so widely applicable in my mind.
It is. It's really universal. And we're lucky enough to live now where the tools for doing so are easier, cheaper, more accessible than ever before.
For
It's
sure. I mean,
really
if I knew
remarkable.
Zoom better, I could probably draw on our screens right now.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. I don't know if, we have those permissions and all with the various platforms, but how many places integrate like drawing, visual whiteboards, that sort of thing? It's universal, and it is so important to, as you said, communicate your ideas more clearly, to understand how to display or diagram or make a mind map. All of that uses the same skills of really presenting things in a creative but organized and visual appealing way. And like you said, that's only one aspect of it. I think the prevalence of audio and music in our life, like I mentioned before, it's more ubiquitous than it ever has been. Even if you really pare it down to the absolute, the lowest common denominator, really. But even something like TikTok or Instagram, in large part, those platforms are popular because people are integrating things like popular audio tracks and songs into them and putting their own spin on them, remixing them, making funny skits to songs and so forth. So it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, I remember. So I got to visit the Ron Clark Academy for a case study. They used our lab discs there a few years ago, and I just remember, like, at one point the whole classroom stood up and started rapping about circuitry. I think it was like parallel and series circuits, and they were singing this whole song and doing this whole dance, and like that is a whole different component of art that is so good for memorization. Like, I remember just being like, man, okay, I'm here for this.
That's awesome.
And I know I was always way more invested and interested in anything where I felt like I got to be a little more creative, put a little more part of myself into it. And like I hated science as a
Mhm.
student. I don't now, but I did. And my favorite science projects were the ones where I got to be creative. So you're definitely going to be engaging and interacting with students who you may not always have caught their attention otherwise.
Absolutely. And that's a really important skill to go the other direction too. Like myself as a child, a lot of students that are more STEM focused might be a little bit more by the book, a little bit more reserved, and they want clear directions. I do this, I get this result. To just go down to the base level of STEM, we have mathematics, right? There's sometimes more than one way to approach a proof or solving an equation, but often there is a right answer, and you either did the techniques correctly or you didn't. But in science, there is so much more creativity that can go into designing an experiment. How do we ask a question and find an interesting answer to that? There is so much creativity that's possible that I didn't even realize until quite late in my scientific career that often the best ways to approach these problems and to frame a hypothesis sometimes can be the most creative, and developing those skills are equally important.
Yeah, I think if any teacher had just told me in plain, simple English that engineering or science was creative, was an art form, I would have actually considered them. It was never a career I considered because I didn't see the creativity in it and I wanted a creative career. Uh,
Yeah,
Even
you
web
can.
design, like that's a huge amount of creativity, but I thought it was just like code. I didn't know really what code meant. Now it's far more prevalent at this point, but
Yeah, I have no idea on the specific statistics, but I would venture a guess that most of the creative world is engaged in things like web design now. Like if you are interested in visual art and design, that is one of the most lucrative and practical and accessible careers that anybody can do it. It is something that is going to really be rewarding, and everyone gets to see and interact with your creative vision. Makes a huge difference.
for sure. Now, we have kind of jumped straight in, which I don't
We
hate,
have.
but I do want to let everyone know this podcast is coming to you from MimioSTEM, which is part of the Boxlight family of products. We have a whole slew of products from LabDisc and Xploris, sort of STEM and STEAM labs, where you're doing science and data logging and all of that, to 3D printers, as well as professional development. That's where Evan comes in, and then a whole curriculum side. So you may hear us reference some of these products throughout today's podcast. We are going to specifically focus on sort of two main areas of how to integrate art, or how to integrate art with technology. Though, as we've discussed already, it doesn't have to be high tech at all. So we're going to do a lot with 3D printing, as well as with not necessarily the Xploris device, but with the software that comes with it. So the two softwares we're going to be featuring today are Robo Print and Xploris Lab. Now, I'm gonna I'm gonna drop this link in the chat, and we invite you to go download the software. It's free. You can follow along. This podcast isn't really going to be too much of a tutorial per se, but we are going to show you how you can utilize these different tools, and whether or not you have a Robo printer, whether you have a different one, or whether you have the Xploris device or not, you'll still be able to fully do all of the activities we're talking about today. Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you, Evan, for dropping that chat in here.
Yep.
Yes, the two software that we're highlighting are about halfway down the page. The link Evan put in the chat there does kind of drop you to this Mimio section, but Boxlight has a lot of software and a lot of products. So look for these two logos on your screen if you decide to follow along.
Yep. And as Hannah mentioned, just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is not, a requirement to use our particular products. We're just using them to demonstrate some ideas. Of course, we do feel that these are, good, useful products that are beneficial for you and your class. But like this Explorer Lab software is totally free to anybody, and it connects to a little lab disk, a device that will display the art that your students create, but the software itself is still free, and you can doodle away on that software to your heart's content, whether or not you actually have the little widget that your students would be able to hold. So there is a lot here that you can get out of the techniques we're showing, even if you don't happen to own one.
And I am realizing that as I hold the things up and demonstrate them, my virtual background is having a bit of an interesting time with things. So I may turn that off. And honestly, my background is covered in art supplies right now. So that's kind of appropriate. I've got, a whole slew of painting things out here from projects I've been doing the last week or so, because I've been in a very artsy mood. I've been covered in paint half this
Yes,
past week.
I think we are going to get to see what you've been working on so diligently the last few days. Uh,
But
some
yeah,
good
why don't
stuff
you
there.
kick us off with oh, actually, I forgot. I was going to kick us off. We're going to do Explore Lab first. Here I am looking at
Yep.
my slide deck and remembering the
I
order we
believe
had
we're
you ready
we're
to
gonna
go.
chat about some animations and some pixel art. We were discussing things like web design and how to integrate coding and using a software platform to demonstrate creativity. This is a great way to do it. I myself am not very confident with actually painting or drawing by hand. My brain and my hand do not work together as well as yours. But pixel art and digital art is something that I can actually sink my teeth into much more easily because I don't have that either just training or honestly, at some point, self-consciousness that I'm afraid that I can't do it and it's not going to look good with digital art. I don't have that hang up at all. So if that is the case for some of your students, this is a great way to approach things.
I think that's a really good point because you will have some students who are hesitant to do art, who are afraid, or maybe they've been told in the past that, their art wasn't great. I think as we talk about art in general, it's important to build an environment of positivity, constructive criticism, but constructive is a very important word there. And honestly, even that part is for the art teachers to do. They're the ones who can comment on how to improve the techniques. I think if you are integrating art into any of your other subjects, the main goal is positivity. I think of a story often of that my dad told me when he was in school, and I don't know what age, but this was, back in the 70s when big poofy coats were in, and he had been drawing a bunch of kids on a toboggan sledding down a hill. And his art teacher made the mistake of coming up to him and saying, "What's with the pumpkins on a sled?" And he has never liked art since. So that story always lives in the back of my mind when I think about art. I know, especially some of you kindergarten teachers out there or young student teachers, you have a very interesting job of playing the "what is this drawing" game with your students. And I've seen this with some homeschooling I've helped with because I've been an art teacher for some homeschool students that needed a little bit of extra artistic influence. And I learned very carefully, like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, what are you drawing? Tell me about this. There are good ways to avoid accidentally misidentifying what your students might be working on if they are not the most obvious creations.
Yes,
But yeah,
indeed. It's so
again, the
easy
digital
to
component is a whole nother nice element that does eliminate some of that, I think.
Yeah, it's so easy to sort of quash that creativity early on if the student isn't particularly confident. And obviously, every kid is different and every student's needs. But just for me personally, the ability to undo and redo, and then in addition, what the Xploris platform we're going to show you in just a minute, because it's just a grid of pixels, it limits what possibilities are out there in just the right ways for me. That I know, like this is a 16 by 16 grid. I don't have unlimited colors, unlimited angles, and lines and colors that I can go for. It confines things or constrains things in a way that many students, I think, because I feel this way, are going to respond to. Because you know, from this, you can kind of, tell what these drawings are. They're legible, and that one over there is a rocket ship, and then we have a volcano with lava. But you don't have to have a huge canvas and all of your various colored pencils or markers or, pastels, whatever you're using. You just have a little mouse and a series of color palette options on the right there. Makes it so
It is
much
also
more.
the tidiest of the arts. I don't end up
Yes.
covered in anything.
Yes. Yes, indeed. We don't have stained fingers as much.
Yeah, mine are fine today. Yesterday they were covered in paint. Had to check. But yeah, so this is the Xploris Lab Animator module. So if you did download it, or if you do have this software, open it up. Like we said, this is free. And I'm going to show you a little bit of how you can use it, and then talk about some ways to integrate it with your teaching, specifically in different subject areas. So this is the software on a PC. It's going to look the same whether you're on a Chromebook, an iPad, even Mac computers that can run iPad apps will be fine. You can sideload an APK onto Google, like EDLA type panels. So this is a really versatile app. And I'm going to go into the art module. And there is a music composing side as well as an animation side. I think for time, we're going to mostly be living in the animation component. But like we said earlier, these are both art areas. And then you have this grid. That's 16 by 16 pixel grid. Sort of the classic animation that we often show people just to get their feet wet is a boat. So you can fill the bottom half of your screen with an ocean. You can take a different blue, fill the top half with a sky. And then notice it has layers here. So I can go to a different layer and draw in a very simple boat shape here. Maybe it's a sailboat. Maybe I'm tying this in with social studies and talking about, different trips across the Atlantic. Are we talking about Magellan or Columbus? Or, there's so many different trips that you could talk about that involve sailors historically. And so I
I'm
can,
even thinking of some of our design challenges that involve creating boats so the students can actually build their own watercraft and test them out, and then maybe draw a little story about what's happening with them.
yeah. And this has, like you said, it's got, erasers, it's got an undo button. Let's say I don't like that line I just did. I can click undo and it should go away. It didn't go away, but hey, that's what the eraser is for. I'll have to figure that out. It sometimes acts up when I am on video calls, and only when I'm on video calls. I don't know why that is. But once I have my, combined image here and I like what it looks like or whatnot, I can duplicate the frames. And with a boat, I'm going to just duplicate it 4 times. And on the last frame, move it down a square. And on the second frame, move it up a square. And then I can click play, and my boat will bob as it plays a cycle animation. So this is sort of one of the super simple ones. You can adjust the speed, have your boat bobbing really fast, have it going really slow, however you'd like. So sometimes we will do activities like this where it's only 1 frame per second because maybe it isn't an animation, but it's more of a slideshow. So some of the ways that you could use this is we have, let's see, secret garden symbolism. I just wrote a design challenge and lesson plan called story symbolism, where students are looking at symbolism in different literature areas. And they draw them out in pixel art, either one or multiple. And then they can talk about, what the door symbolizes, or what the key, or what the wheelchair symbolizes in that specific piece of literature. So these were all inspired by the Secret Garden. I've also done activities and lessons on this with, let's see, do I have symbols in here? Dutch symbols. So if you're doing social studies units on different states, different countries, I remember I did a project where I researched India as a student. You can have them show different symbols of that country in pixel art. So this is, I think, one of the most applicable ways to bring art easily and quickly into your classroom. And the cool thing is here, I can Bluetooth connect to my physical device if I have one and actually have it play back on here so you can upload it to your device, and then my screen's going to change here, and now it's going to play the slideshow of images that I've created. But you don't need this to use this. Use this software. I'm pointing at my other monitor here. I do see a request for the software again. I'm going to copy it into the chat for you there, Christy. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Henry.
And so those are sort of language arts, social studies integrations with this environment. But the examples I showed here, if you think about a volcano, you could be tying it in with social studies in Pompeii. You could also be tying it in with a natural disasters unit. On the rocket, I actually just wrote another lesson plan that is very interdisciplinary, where the students start by building this rocket animation, and then they use all of the built-in sensors on this, and they connect it to a circuit, and they have to generate enough power with that circuit, and they're using a lime. So it's a lime circuit, and they have to figure out how to make it into a series circuit. And when it has enough voltage, then we pop out of this animation interface, and we have them actually go into their coding environment, because this has all of this, and they can build an if-then statement that says, if you get enough voltage, then launch the rocket. So like, this is coding, it's technology, it's science, because you're looking at circuits, and it's art all in one. So this particular example of a lesson does require the physical device, but it's just an example of how you can think of tying in art no matter what device you have. So you may not have this specific one, but you have other types of coding things with screens, or even online like Scratch type things often have outputs.
Fantastic. Hannah, if I could share my screen for a minute,
Of course.
I'd love to chat about the music section, because there is a whole music section that we didn't necessarily have a chance to show yet. But while you were talking, I took the liberty of drawing a pumpkin on a sled. We are approaching Halloween, so we've got a pumpkin. I do need to still animate, maybe move up and down the hill a little bit, slide away, but I
love
did my
it. This
best in the
brings me
time that I
joy. Thank
had.
you.
Yeah, I thought you would appreciate that. So you can draw a pumpkin on a sled on purpose if you want. All right. So just to recap here, in Explorer Lab, we have all of these different modules, science and engineering, as Hannah was just showing you, the coding can integrate with these. And then we were just doing the animation module, but then there's also Composer here. And I am certainly no virtuoso composer here, but even if you and your students aren't sure exactly where to start, there are some included tunes that are probably, if not super recognizable, depending on your experience with music, at least accessible to you. And actually, I'm going to just see here if I am sharing my audio.
If you play it back, I can let you know.
Yeah, Zoom is always a little bit tricky on that. Let me just see if
I
there's
think
any.
you have to select it when you start sharing. I don't know if there's a way to
Yeah,
add
I'm
it
going to try
after
that
the
as
fact.
well. Share sound. Perfect. So this should. Oh, well, never mind.
Can it
We're
only
just going
share
to
from a
share the
web
screen.
browser?
No, it's a Mac thing. Of course, they have those security questions that they're going to make me restart Zoom in order to allow it. No, at the very least, you could see the animation as it runs through there, that this is a very much simplified music editor. You don't need to know how to write music or how to read music in order to create a tune here. So it's perfect for those younger kids or people who are not as experienced in music just yet. But you can see, you can define the notes themselves, obviously. You can also vary the length of the notes. So you can see that this particular tone here is a bit longer than the others around it. Of course, that's very important for learning rhythms. And then you can also include rests. So there is a lot that can be done with this simple editor. You're not really going to be able to create extremely complex pieces of music, but it's more than capable of creating recognizable melodies that you or your students may already know, and doing some fun activities on the audio front. And just like the animator, you can send these to your device. So whether you want to just keep this on a tablet or a computer, or send this over to the little handheld device to play back your song. You can do either one. But it's a lot of fun to experiment with both the animator and the composer. A lot of good options there. And even with this composer, not only can we get um, just purely the joy of creating music, but also pattern recognition, learning counting, learning durations, time. You can integrate all of those STEM concepts into music as it stands. So a lot that can be
Yeah, we have
done
some
with this
lesson
fun little
plans
platform.
on math topics on pattern recognition using that environment. And we also have some on social studies and science that use that environment that talk about Morse code. And so also, as I'm sitting here talking about it, we have lessons. All of the
Yes,
lessons
indeed.
I am talking about that I am referencing are on mystemkits.com. That is our curriculum platform. And we have over 500 engineering design challenges and standards driven lesson plans, many of which integrate art. All of the engineering design challenges do have sort of that art and design component. So those are on mystemkits.com. I put a link to that in the chat. You can sign up for a free trial if you don't already have an account, and check it out for a week. If you need a little longer, you can always just let me know as well. But we want you to get in and try using it, and you can explore a little bit that way. Also on there, which I didn't even think to mention, the animator environment. I have written many lesson plans that are using that pixel grid with math. So we do lines of symmetry, we do coordinate plane, we have some that are on area and perimeter. And so even if you don't have, the animator environment, you can do it with like little squares. We have some of these where they line up the art in a physical way, but I feel like the
Mhm.
animator environment is just so much faster to have it
It is.
digitally. So
But, even back in the old ancient days at this point where computers were in their infancy, graphic designers making user interfaces just used graph paper. You can just as easily recreate most of this with a standard graph paper and a pencil. It's totally fine.
or if you want to do a bunch of like quick art where they're not necessarily turning it in, you can laminate the graph paper and have them use wet erase markers so that it is not permanent. It doesn't feel like it's going to go down in paper. I feel like a lot of students get self-conscious. I love the fleetingness. You can save these, but you don't have to. Like it's about the experience as much as anything else.
Absolutely. So I think, Hannah, we have a few lessons that I'd like to highlight just on this. And then we were also going to spend some time on 3D printing.
Yes.
So I suppose we should probably transition over to that as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my browser for you. Okay. And I'm going to show you mystemkits.com. And Hannah, I'm sure you are more than happy to include a link in the chat to my STEM kits. But as Hannah has been saying, I have lessons, I've been designing things. This is what Hannah excels at. And she has all of these amazing kits, both for people with 3D printers and people who may not have that technology. You can use many of these with alternative options. But you can see if you just search for something like art, you're going to find all sorts of really fun kits. One of my favorites is actually the Impressionism kit, which I loaded up on its own here. This is a kit that uses 3D printing to teach a little bit about art history. And so you can see coming out of a 3D printer, maybe you're able to identify some of these paintings maybe a little bit more obviously. Starry Night is about as recognizable as it gets. Oh, I wouldn't you know it, Hannah, you are going to love the example that I'm going to show in just a few minutes because that is the exact same painting that I have already chosen for mine. If anybody's a fan
Painting.
of pointillism, you'll probably recognize that. But even after you 3D print these, and I think because I zoomed in, my little scrolling ticker here for the various pictures was hiding there. But you can introduce, actual paints and other media. So Hannah's showing on her screen right now the finished version of Starry Night. You can see it is a chunk of 3D printed PLA. This is not canvas. But it gives students a place to start. They don't need to be the genius of Van Gogh to actually recreate the perfect line strokes there, but they can still get the benefits of creating in person. We've been sort of
And
selling
if
the
you don't
praises
see
of
in the
digital
chat,
art.
we've
Hmm?
we've got someone saying that kid is the best. I got to experience it in person with Jillian. So
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I really like this one, and it is just so much fun to. And it's not really paint by numbers, of course, but you have a template that you can build on, and you can take that in exactly the same direction as the artist, or maybe put your own spin on it. But it gives you a place to start. If, like me, you would ha struggle mightily to recreate the shapes and the shading and the various things going on in these works of art. So I really like that particular kit. Um, we were also looking at lab discs. So if I can click into some of our Xploris lessons here, we were chatting about some of the art projects that you can do with the Xploris. And for example, Morse music is right here. This is what Hannah was mentioning, where you can actually use the Xploris Composer module to decipher Morse code. And this one doesn't have as many fun pictures just because this is a lesson plan and it's usually just that composer module. And so, but this is understanding the history of communication and sending messages in code to your classmates, which is pretty fun. What kid isn't going to love to send secret messages that they have to decode? And right next to it, we have a petroglyphs lesson, which is using the pixel art to recreate animated petroglyphs that tells your story. Sort of recreating what those ancient cultures did in terms of portraying their everyday life. Your students are able to pick a story about their life, what's important to them, and draw their own petroglyphs. A little bit easier than creating your own die or carving them into rocks. You can simply use your computer.
slightly faster too.
Just a bit. Unfortunately, not as permanent, but much easier to change your mind if you accidentally, made your head a little bit misshapen. You can alter that. A little bit simpler. No, there is a lot of really great resources on my STEM kit. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I definitely would. And I can no longer see the chat because I am screen sharing, but I'm going to pull that back up now and just make sure there's nothing
You're
else
good.
that has come in, but I think we're good. And Hannah, thanks as always for posting and keeping an eye on the chat. Now, one of the things that you may have noticed in here, I did specifically highlight this, so it's not exactly a secret, is that most of these kits do use 3D printers. And one of our sort of main product lines is 3D printers for education. So, of course, we had to talk a little bit about how we can use 3D printers specifically for art and creativity. Now, obviously, and print just about anything in a range of shape sizes is extremely creative. But sometimes students aren't quite ready for 3D modeling. Maybe they're more comfortable in the two-dimensional space, especially as they're starting off. So we have done lots of sessions and trainings on things like Tinkercad, which we will continue to do. Tinkercad is a fantastic 3D modeling program that is accessible to students, but we all have to start somewhere, and some kids may not be quite ready for that, or maybe we just want to spend some time working on two-dimensional creativity for a little while. And so I thought we could talk about creating what's called a lithopane. Lithopanes are a ton of fun, and they use the 3D printer to actually build a kind of a shape that, when created and when you actually set it up physically in the real world and shine light through it, it looks just absolutely incredible. So, for example, this little heart ornament here, this is nothing that we made. This is just from this website, but you can see the thickness of this plastic actually determines how much light is able to leak through this design when you put it up to a window. Hannah's got one on her video there too, which is that famous picture of the mother during the Great Depression, a really iconic photograph. You would never know that that's what it looks like until you actually shine light through it. As she holds it up and on, or even without the flashlight, it just looks like a hunk of plastic. So this is so much fun to create, and they are so simple. That's one of the reasons it's such a popular technique, is really all you need is a picture. So I really like this website, lithopanemaker.com. I'm going to drop this in the chat as well. This is a free website, not affiliated with us by any means, but of course it will work with any 3D printer that you happen to have as well. And you can see there's a variety of shapes you can create here. I'm just going to stick with the flat lithopane maker just for simplicity's sake. This is just going to be one dimensional sheet here. It's going to be a few millimeters thick. But if we click on the flat lithopane maker, you can see it just asks for an image. And so I thought, as Hannah already shared, we could use just a very recognizable piece of art here, Sunday on La Grande Jatte. Bonus points for anybody in the chat who happens to know who actually painted this painting. And Hannah, I would ask that you reply last because I know you know. But that is a very recognizable piece of art. I just got a free JPEG from the Chicago Museum, and we can upload this and design our own lithopane. Most of the time, the default sort of resolution and dimensions here will be just fine. I am going to say don't crop it because you can see here by default it does give you a square. Most paintings are not square, but you can just adjust that crop setting here. And then it also has this relatively crucial dimension of thickness. So in order to create a lithopane, you do have to shine light through it. Otherwise, it will really not look like anything particularly impressive. And I find that about 3 millimeters is a good maximum thickness. Any higher than that, and you start to reduce the amount of light that actually comes through, and it sort of reduces the impact of your lithophane. So don't go too thick, but also don't go too thin on these lithopanes because they do have to actually stand up and be structurally sound in the real world. So you can't make it 0, or like maybe 0.1 millimeters is definitely not going to be the best choice there. They need to be robust enough to actually exist in the real world. And I'm just going to put in my email address here and create an STL. So it's just going to download to my downloads folder here. And you can see if I just open this file, it is already ready for me. So I'm just going to open my STL here. And you can see there's my
Oh, it
lithophane.
puts it in a frame.
Yes, that's actually an option on this particular software. That not every STL creator or lithopane software is going to give you a frame, but this one has that option. You can turn it off. But you can see here, I do have the texture. Once it prints it, it's going to be a recognizable work of art. It doesn't look like much right now because, again, these really shine literally when you put a light through them. But that is ready to go. I can simply print it. And Hannah wins the
I
challenge.
stalled.
You did stall quite a bit. I will say this isn't an art history lecture, so anybody who didn't know about Georges Seurat, no shame in that. But it is quite a famous style and piece of art, famous enough at least to have gotten into my STEM kits, right? As one of those classics of art. So that's one way to create a lithopane. You may have noticed here that I was actually using a program that views STLs on my computer. And for those of us who aren't totally aware, an STL is basically what you use to print. It's called slicing, but it converts a three-dimensional file into something that a printer can view. And we also have on our downloads page the same link that you've gotten in the chat already, Robo Print. And that is what I was using to display the file that that website gave me. Now, if you don't have a Robo printer, Um, feel free, continue using that Lithopane website. Lots of great options there. And whatever slicer your particular brand of printer uses or expects, it could be Cura or many others, you can continue to use that slicer to open the file that that website gives you. Now, if you do have a Robo printer and Robo print, you don't actually need to take that detour through the Lithopane website. It does do a very good job of creating these for you, but you don't necessarily need it. So I'm actually just going to open RoboPrint here on my computer, and you can see we can just directly give it an image. So here I have my blank canvas, and I can actually go up to the File menu and load a file. I'll give it the same JPEG. And you can see here that I have the same relative options. And one that's really fun is you aren't necessarily limited to a two-dimensional plane. You can choose a sphere or a tube. And Hannah actually has some great lessons she's going to share in just a minute that use those that are brand new. And then we have these same options. So 1 millimeter as the minimum thickness, 3 millimeters as the maximum. Those are pretty good values. It chooses the size based on the image that you give it, and of course you can adjust that. I'll just leave it as the default. And you can see here, I have a very similar image or a 3D design that is created from that image. I will say for this, in order to get the Lithopane experience, we do need to rotate it because it is very important that you print these vertically. So I'm going to give it a 90 degrees and the x-axis. So this is a vertical model. That's going to work much better for printing. It's not going to have sort of those terrain lines that you might associate with like a topographic map. If you've printed some things, you can see as it changes dimensions, it has some lines on it. And so to avoid that, we just print it vertically. And
The
then another
important thing
tip.
to note there is also to add a raft to your print
Oh,
settings
yes. Oh,
because they are
yes,
very thin. But yeah,
definitely.
always if you're doing anything like this that has high detail, vertical is going to print a lot better for you.
Yes. And another tip here, I haven't had too much of a problem with this myself, but it may be a little bit more reliable to print it as sort of heading back on the y-axis of your printer. This little arrow down here, if you're able to see on my screen, that is the front door of my printer, and heading back sort of perpendicular to the door is a good way to position it, just because the print head moves a little bit more smoothly front to back than it does side to side. So can't hurt.
And I do think that varies based on the specific 3D printer you have. We've heard this more with other types of printers, more than we have experienced it with our Robo E4 specifically, but it is a tip we've gotten and wanted to pass on.
Yep.
I do also want to say that with this software, you don't have to have a Robo printer to use this. You can export and save from here as an STL to then bring into your own Cura, whatever. So you can use
Yes,
the
again.
software to do the 2D to 3D conversion, whatever 3D printer you may have. Or
Yep.
even just
And
to create a 3D model that's cool, even if you don't have a 3D printer.
fantastic. And as you said, Hannah, please enable rafts. In RoboPrint, that is the default. You do have to go through the extra step to turn off your raft. If anybody's not sure what a raft is, because you're not 3D printing that regularly, once I slice my model, you'll be able to see the raft on my screen. It's basically a few extra layers of filament at the bottom of my print that helps stick it down to the build plate because, as Hannah said, this is a very thin print. It will have the tendency to fall over as it's being built unless you give it a raft. And so you can see here, my model has this little extra bit of filament. It's highlighted in purple here, as opposed to the salmon color of the model itself. And so you can see that is just going to help adhere it down to the surface so it can create it. You're able to quickly snap that off when you're done printing. You don't necessarily have to keep that on. And then on the Lithopane creation website, one of the benefits of the frame that they give you, aside from just looking kind of nice to have a picture frame, it's thicker. And so you probably don't need a raft when you use that one because it has a much thicker base to it. So depending on what technique you're using, that could be very valuable to make sure that raft is enabled.
Now, talking about integrating this kind of thing into other subjects, the lessons that I have been covered in paint with this past week are actually the ones related to ancient Egypt, as we alluded to at the beginning. So we have a couple new engineering design challenges in my STEM kits where students are actually using this 2D to 3D conversion tool to create canopic jars. So these are, the jar part at the bottom was 3D printed on each of these. And so this one, I'm looking at the mirror image. This one was done digitally, so they're very nice, clean hieroglyphs. This is actually an inscription from an existing canopic jar that I just sort of copied in as an example. This one was hand drawn with markers. Do I still have that sitting around here somewhere? I do. So they would have drawn it on paper here and then take a photo and bring that into Robo print that way. And you set it up as a canister, so it creates that jar shape. And then for the top components, this one was done with oven baked clay. This one is done with paper mache and then painted and decorated. And then we have other design challenges on the other half of that use Tinkercad, which if you missed last month's podcast, Jillian and I went all into Tinkercad showing lots of tools and tips. That's on our Mimeo STEM YouTube page. So you can always go back and watch the recording. But for our other half of that design challenge, we have designing the lids that then get 3D printed, and these just go on toilet paper rolls, or you can combine them together into, a fully 3D printed type of creation. Obviously, the ones where they're creating the lids are much more complex design challenges. People design for students who have used Tinkercad before, who are comfortable with it, and the full 3D process there. Whereas these canopic jars are much faster from a design standpoint because they just draw it on paper and get it into their computer. So we wanted to give teachers the option of doing this type of activity with different levels, depending on where their students are at. And for anyone who doesn't know, a canopic jar is part of the ancient Egyptian mummification process where they would actually pull out different organs from within the body prior to mummifying it and then preserve them individually in little jars. And by New Kingdom, each of the jars was protected by a specific deity. So the whole part of this lesson is actually, we spend a lot of time on the students doing research and learning what it is. We start by passing out a canopic jar from the My STEM Kits Artifacts of Africa kit, and they get to kind of inquire what is this thing before building their own. And we have them using AI, if it's allowed in your district, to do the research, find good ways to use AI, like finding reliable websites and things like that. So it gets into a lot of different technology, language arts, social studies elements, all before the art and design and that part. So super interdisciplinary, just went live about 30 minutes before this webinar podcast started. My goal was to get them out live before the session began. Also, if you're curious what the weird red thing is on the screen behind me, it is the life-size version of this. So they are much bigger than the little one you would pass to your students.
Yes, indeed. I've been quite jealous of your week, Hannah, at least in that respect, getting the chance to print and paint all of these projects to really flesh out this lesson plan, because those canopic jars look great. It's such a fun way to get students the experience to handle things that ordinarily would be behind panes of glass or even just only online. Some of us are lucky enough to live near a museum that has some artifacts, but not everybody can go to the museum. Not everybody can have a field trip, certainly not that frequently. And so this gets the students to really get some hands-on time with that. And now they actually get to create their own, which is just so much fun. They can design the hieroglyphics that go on there. They can choose the ancient Egyptian deity to represent the top of that canister. So a lot of fun and,
so
of
much
course,
too,
educational content in there.
It was a lot of fun for me researching and learning about this, and I know it will be for your students. So yeah, we are at our 45 minutes plus a few because we got excited. But thank you all for joining today. This is our contact info. We'll also drop this in the chat for you in case you have any follow-up questions. If you want to learn more about our high-speed education printers or anything like that, or our new Xploris lab discs, which have so many capabilities, we would love to share those with you. So reach out, give us an email, and be sure to join us. We have 2 upcoming sessions I want to let you all know about. The next one is October 3rd, and this is a students are invited session where we are going to be in Tinkercad doing art with them. And we're not going to try and make it too interdisciplinary. It's only 30 minutes, but I'm going to be showing them how to make this pretty pumpkin using some of the features in Tinkercad. So you can register with this QR code that is there on the screen or the link. The link is case sensitive, so make sure you type that in with the capital letters. And then the next one, our next learning lab, which are these two-person podcasts, will be Braden and I back later in November. That'll be, or sorry, later in October. That'll be October 17th. And this one is, okay, now that you've been doing all this 3D design with your students, hopefully between last month's session, this month, and next month's learning lab or design day, we have on how to tweak or adjust your student designs to increase the odds of printing successfully, because that is definitely a learning curve of learning what will and what won't. And, you know, I've gotten plenty of emails from teachers over the years of why isn't this printing? And it's normally a very simple, easy fix. So we're going to share some of those tricks and tips with y'all. And I am dropping this one in the chat as well. The podcast is the link that starts with LL as a learning lab. The design day is the link that starts with the 2 Ds. So look forward to seeing y'all then. And if you have any questions, we can stick around for another minute. But thanks for coming.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for your time today. Hopefully we got some interesting tips or ideas on how to boost your students' creativity, and we will see you back. As Hannah mentioned, we got some really cool stuff coming up in October, fun for both educators and students. So hope to see you there.